This conference will now be recorded.
So we are recording this program, and welcome everyone to the 2022 SGP Certification Criteria Review. We're really excited that you have joined us here today. My name is Marci Kinter. As I said, I am the Vice President of Government and Regulatory Affairs for Printing United Alliance, and I will have Paul introduce himself.
Good morning. My name is Paul Biernat. I'm with Brandkey Graphics. We are a graphics and auditing company.
So Paul is also on the technical committee. So between Paul and myself, we're going to work to present the changes to the SGP certification criteria. So welcome everyone. And if you do have any questions, we encourage you to enter them into the chat box, and we will take the questions at the end of our program here today. So today, what we're really looking to do is we want you all to understand why changes were made. Why the SGP Technical Committee, we worked through the 2016 criteria document and looked at how we needed to make changes to reflect what was going on in the world with sustainability and to integrate some of those principles, as well as how we can encourage printers to move forward in their sustainability journey. So we're going to walk through the criteria, and we're just going to look at highlighting what is new and expanded. We're not going to talk about what was deleted. We can provide that information to you at a later date if you so desire, but we do encourage you to take a look, and hopefully you have a copy of the 2022 certification criteria, and that you take a look at that and compare it to your 2016 version. And then at the end, we're also going to talk about our timeline for implementation. I would also encourage you, I'm sorry, my audio sounds robotic. But this is really the best I can do right now. We're also going to encourage you to, encourage you to really look at, if you are a certified facility, to look at your impact tracker and to sign up for the webinar program, and we'll mention this several times. That's going to be held on February 10th. That's going to look at the changes that have been made to the SGP impact tracker that is going to correlate to the changes in the certification criteria. So our review cycle. The SGP certification criteria is reviewed every 5 years. We started this particular review in 2021. We were a little bit late, but that was definitely due to the pandemic. The comment period for the revised criteria closed in September of 2021, at which time the technical committee took all the comments, reviewed, and included them as appropriate. The SGP board approved the final criteria in November of 2021, and the launch date for the new criteria elements is this month. We've been working to update the impact tracker, so we're going to take a look at some of the new changes and highlight those changes that have occurred. Significant changes. We have updated the templates that have been and have created templates for all documents required to be uploaded to the impact tracker. We have updated all of the written procedure templates that are now included in the impact tracker, and we've also reviewed all the other documentation that was currently in the tracker. So again, February 10th, mark that on your calendar. Facilities, we really had a long conversation about this, but you do not have to use the new templates, but you must use something that is equivalent, because we are trying to make sure that the facilities understand what it is they have to do and how to implement and develop the new criteria. And this is from your lead auditor, Wendy Naden. Yes, no checkboxes on regulatory compliance audits are no longer acceptable. There has to be documentation associated with it. As a result, we have updated the environmental audit template as well as the safety and health audit template to help you provide that documentation. A new element for the management system is management of change. It does require a written procedure, and we will talk about that a little bit later. A new element for best practices is we have included a solid waste audit. Another new element is a strengthening of the communication strategy, and Paul will talk about this a little bit more, that really we're talking about how you need to reach 80% of the members of each external group. And then for the training written procedure and the training best practices, now you really do need to identify which group needs to complete which training topics. So we've really tried to narrow down. The technical committee took a hard look at each element and really honed in on what some of the changes must be. So we're going to start with the sustainability management system, and we're going to take a look at the changes that were incorporated by and adopted by the board for your sustainability management system. If we don't talk about a topic such as a sustainability policy, it really means that no changes were made to that element for the 2022 criteria. So we're not, as I said, we're going to hit the high points. So within your sustainability committee, really what we tried to do and what we looked at is how do we make sure that the documentation really does talk about the progress you're making regarding your certification requirements, looking at how we can tighten up that everything that the sustainability committee does has to be documented. The templates in the tracker have been updated to include this. And we've really looked at how then the sustainability committee is still that linchpin for you to develop your sustainability program. Under implementation and operation, big change here. The audit requirement is still there, but it is no longer found under checking and corrective actions. All environmental and safety and health audit requirements, as well as the requirement to identify your EHS laws and regulations that are applicable to your facility, have been moved under 1.1.3.1 regulations. The reason that we have done this is that the committee took a hard look at the flow of the SMS, and they really felt that based on discussions with certified facilities and also discussions with the auditors, that it made more sense to move the requirements for the audits for both environmental and safety and health under this section in implementation and operations. So you're still required to conduct them on a biannual basis. And the templates that have been included in the impact tracker for you to use, as I indicated before, have been updated so that you can provide that documentation, and it's not just a checkbox. And we have one for US and Canadian requirements. So it's important that you note that you have this ability now to take a look at what you're doing within your facility. So again, if you have questions, I encourage you to enter it into the chat box, because we have been going through these at that 50,000 foot level. And one thing also Paul and I will talk about as we go through this, if there's an area that you would like a deep dive, if you say, hey, I really want a deep dive on this element, I want to know a little bit more about this, please let us know. Because one of our goals and one of our opportunities as a technical committee is to identify these deep dive areas and to present really, 30-minute programs on one specific element. So we already know we're going to do them on several because they're new, but we really want you to identify areas that you would like more information on. And once we have those, then the technical committee will be able to take a look at them and develop programs appropriately so that we can help you through these changes, but also help you understand what these changes mean and how you can incorporate them into your facility.
Concerning moving on with implementation and operation, your continuous improvement projects. So just note that the 2016 criteria remains unchanged. So all the requirements for this process is still unchanged. But with this, you can see that identify and selecting your annual projects. So these are things that, the following factors should be considered. So making sure that you're hitting all the pillars of sustainability, and making sure also that it has a significant impact, with your facility metrics and stakeholders. So using a smart format, project statements, and again, it still remains specifically required. Also to note on this, your facilities, really the simplest way to look at this is your facility should just focus on areas where they get the most bang for the buck and has the most impact. Next. So with this concerning your communications 1.1.3.3, your written procedure must be documented, each identified stakeholder group and the communication strategies adopted for each. So while it's important that all your employees have good awareness of the efforts, when you jump down to your customers and suppliers, you're really focusing on who's having the most impact on your business or that you're dealing with. But again, it's more of a communication thing. It's more, not training per se, but communication. And this can really help your engagement with the impact tracker is key, because there's many things there that can assist you with this. Next.
Great. So, continuing with communications, you really do need to know that there's more detail that you need to include in your strategy and in your written policy, your written procedure, excuse me. And you will notice, as well as Paul mentioned, there's really a stronger emphasis, even throughout the entire criteria document, on the use of the SGP impact tracker, both through the role of the tracker data, which would be really towards your internal audience and your internal stakeholders, as well as how are you going to use the SGP engagement display, and how is this engagement display going to be used to provide to your community, your outside community, how you're going to be talking about and telling your sustainability story. So it's important that you understand that really the impact tracker now more than ever is really seen to be integral and is being used as that sustainability dashboard for the facilities within the certification program.
In addition, with training, so again, documentation is so critical. So it specifically states now that your training must be documented. It also identifies breaking out the stakeholders and job requirements and making sure that those people that do need to be trained, for example, here it states waste segregation and minimizing VOCs, that they do have proper training. And then again, with the stakeholders, if you have temporary contract labor, things like that, suppliers that are on site consistently, that they are getting general awareness. They may not have to go to the depth of training some of the employees have to, but it is critical that they do. In addition to this, the SGP is trying to help out, as Marci pointed out earlier. There are going to be some short webinars coming up in the future, so that in the coming months, this can also help you and your teams know a little bit more about these changes and give a little bit more direction. Next.
So the new requirement, management of change. So our criteria within the SGP certification has always asked you to consider what impacts you have on safety environmental issues whenever you look at changing out chemicals or you're adding new equipment. That has always been a requirement. But and this was specifically requested and included from Wendy Naden, our SGP lead auditor, that now we really need to take the next step. And that when you do look at changes within your facility, you need to integrate this decision making, and it should be proactive. That you are looking actively at what is the impact of this change, of bringing in a new equipment, et cetera, on your solid waste, on the generation of your hazardous waste, on all your environmental aspects, your safety and health issues, your energy issues if appropriate, and that you take a look at this beforehand, and you need to document it because a written procedure for this is required. Now, flowing out of this under best practices, you have your energy audit, which is still there. You have the new solid waste audit, and you do have your environmental health and safety audits. So we're not asking you, the new requirement is the solid waste audit, but all those other components, like your indoor air quality assessment, your air emissions assessment, all of those components need to be included in your decision-making process as to what is this going to impact us when we change our environment. So this is one of those areas that we've already identified as a deep dive. So I would encourage you to take a look at the criteria element in the certification criteria. And then again, during the impact tracker changeover, you will have ability to take a look at the solid waste audit template as well as the written procedure template prior to the impact tracker discussion on February 10th. But this is a new requirement. So this will go into effect this month for those facilities that are going to be applying soon. So under checking and corrective action, we still have the requirement for a sustainability management system audit. As a reminder, the other two audit requirements were moved over to under regulations, so they're still there. Don't think that they've disappeared. They're still over there. Now, again, similar to the EHS audits, checking those boxes yes and no is just not acceptable. You need to really take a harder look at your sustainability management system, and when you're doing the audit, to really make sure that it is working properly and it is functioning. Again, this isn't a regulatory audit. This is really an internal audit to help you how you can go ahead and include new changes to your audit document and to make your audit, to make your SMS even better. That's the whole goal of an SMS audit, is to increase the ability of your sustainability system to operate within your facility. Document control, the major change here is that you definitely, within your written procedure, need to describe how the SGP impact tracker is used, because that is where the majority of your documentation is going to reside. And then the change, we also clarified that all records in the impact tracker, as well as any training and communication documentation that you might keep outside of the tracker, needs to be kept for 3 years. And that really is to include in the cycle of the 2-year recertification. Now, the annual report, we are now recognizing that the SGP impact tracker is the tool for the annual report, so you don't need to develop anything on paper and send it to the SGP program. In fact, we haven't been doing that for a couple of years now because of the tracker. So now the certification criteria is aligning with what we're doing with the tracker, so that your annual report is what you've done and what you've filled out within the tracker for your documentation. And yes, this is checked by your lead auditor. So I would encourage you to ensure and maintain your metrics and all your documentation. And we felt that the tracker is really a good tool for you to utilize in order to maintain on track. All right, so that concludes our discussion on the changes in the sustainability management system portion. We do have changes that will look at best practices. And again, we're only going to highlight those that have been changed. There have been many deletions is I guess the best word. So again, I encourage you to crosswalk it. If you do have any specific questions about an element as to whether or not it's been changed or deleted, please go ahead and put that in the chat box and we will take a look at that.
So for annual metrics to track performance of the sustainability management system, again, as Marci said earlier, all facilities now must use the SGP impact tracker to maintain your metrics. And the metrics have been reorganized on the impact tracker to integrate with those associated activities. So more to come on this with the webinar that's planned for February 10th. Again, a lot of good changes made to the impact tracker, and so it's very important that you get familiar and comfortable with using that. Next. So external stakeholder communications. So the three big changes here again are further clarifying and highlighting opportunities to align with principles of a circular economy. And it's really important to understand, the details to the circular economy. That's seems to be where everyone's going in all industries. Another change is a dialogue with the substrate suppliers. Very important that discussions with them are all surrounding the circular economy, maintaining a list of characteristics and making sure you have documentation to support that. If a substrate is advertised as having a quality such as biodegradable, then your documentation needs to confirm that and verify it. Dialogue with chemical suppliers. So again, as you get, this is an element of the circular economy, listing the topics and making sure that they're expanded to include IARC chemicals as well as covering Proposition 65. Next.
Yep. So we have another new requirement. And as you know, SGP certification has expanded to include the suppliers within the printing industry. And really, it was an interesting discussion within SGP's Technical Committee and actually the Board of Directors about this one new requirement. Because our overarching goal within the SGP certification program is to encourage our customers to recognize SGP certification and to utilize SGP certified facilities. Somebody's not on mute. Okay, great. Then we need to really encourage and to have a program in place where our certified facilities, and this is the supply chain issue, must have a program in place that also encourages the use of suppliers that have certifications. In other words, we must walk the walk. So now we are looking at facilities need to look at your suppliers and you need to determine whether or not they have any sort of certification within their operation. We really can't just require the use of SGP suppliers that are certified because we don't have any. But now we're looking at, there are quite a few suppliers that are ISO 9000 certified, they have 14001, or they have other management systems in place. So now it is really looking at the certified and the communities talking to each other about the importance of this, because similar to the SGP certification criteria for the printers, for the suppliers, it looks at what is being done within their facility. And it is not really focusing so much on their the products going out the door, certifying those as much as certifying their manufacturing operations. So yeah, I encourage you to look at that and to really determine how best to move forward with documenting this as well as talking to your supply base. And again, this goes back to that 80% rule that Paul talked about. We're really looking at gaining information on those that have the most impact in your facility. Training. A little bit more on training. So training requirements were pushed all into one section, and it now formally recognizes that contractors, if they are part of the continuous improvement project, then they need to be appropriately trained. And if contractors don't need the training, you just need to document it. And it still requires training on these specific skills and responsibilities under the facility's sustainability program. So you have to look at, again, if you look at this flows from that SMS requirement for your written procedure for training. If you are looking at and you have to have, you're doing a recycling program, you need to look at a training program on segregation of waste. You need to identify who, not just you're doing a training program on segregation of waste, but it's your employees, is it your contractors, is it your suppliers? You really need to look at and document which training is being done by which group. And this also looks at still having the training done for your employees under general awareness. So again, we haven't really taken anything out. We have just all solidified it into one area. And you know me, this is one of my soapbox issues. Your sustainability, these elements under best practices oftentimes flow directly from one of your written procedures. So your written procedure on training should look at this best practice and ensure that you are covering all these elements within your written procedure so that you are meeting all these elements within the best practice. Nothing really stands alone. Very few things within the SGP certification program do stand alone. So I encourage you to take a look at your written procedure to see how if it needs to be modified to include some of these elements. So you used to have a section called checking and corrective actions under best practices. It's now more aptly named environment, health, and safety programs. So it does still maintain the requirement to do your air emissions reduction assessment. A new template has been developed. It maintains the requirement to ensure that you have indoor air quality, acceptable indoor air quality. Again, a new template has been developed and the update is still required every year. However, this also flows into your written procedure for management of change. So if you are moving in a new chemical, then you would need to do, and you might need to look at redoing your indoor air quality assessment to determine what would be the impact on the safety and health issues within your facility. So again, you can see how this element in the best practice is going to flow into not only your environmental health and safety audits, but also into your management of change procedure. Under chemical management, we really did look at and we pushed up janitorial cleaning supplies. There's a requirement about looking at the use of third party, and it still looks at whether or not you have a contract versus internal janitorial services. But now we're listing those chemicals that you need to avoid. So it's important then that you take a look at what chemicals you're using and making sure that these chemicals are not used in your facility, and looking at how you can change your janitorial cleaning practices.
With waste management, this will be applicable to all print processes. Two items, the new one is that conducting a solid waste audit every 2 years. And This is a new requirement. It's an important one. And then as well as what was maintained was the reference to first in, first out for your inventory use plan. And that's been moved basically from sections. This specific item, a webinar on this specific one is planned. So stay tuned and please plan on attending. Next. So transportation management. So this is, you know, I mean, obviously tailpipe emissions is the big one, and how it impacts air quality and climate change. You know, this is going to be a significant focus over the next 10 years, you know, with vehicle fleets and transitioning from fossil fuel vehicles to electric or alternative fuel source. The big thing with this is you really start thinking long term, you know, with the net zero 50 or 2050 goal planning. And that's with the electricity generation and transportation. So if you're not familiar with that, feel free to look it up. I'm sure there'll be more communication with this to come. Some of the changes that include on this is the operating in the US and Canada, all facilities to at least investigate the Smart Way program. And then the investigate to include the carbon footprint calculation with your facility to the final client. And then conducting an employee survey regarding their commuting options. There's no requirements here, but just to conduct the survey. And then, you know, actually implementing and not just investigating the no idle policy for your loading docks. Next.
So when we get to utilities and energy management, there obviously is still a requirement to conduct an energy audit. But again, we have a new template that has you take a look at how you are migrating to electricity generated from renewable resources. Because we do have, someone is typing, please mute yourself. We do have a new template that takes a look at that, because we are really focusing on and encouraging printers to look at how to really look at putting on, you know, we have printers that have done solar. So now we need to be able to recognize that within our energy audit and also within the facility, within the SGP program itself. So there is a new section that has, it used to be just take a look at, you know, regeneration and renewable energy credits. Now we're going to be putting in a cost benefit analysis template that's going to have you conduct every 2 years a cost benefit analysis to look at whether or not it makes sense for you to purchase RECs, or to go into a power purchase agreement, or to look at that on-site energy generation and storage, such as what facilities have done via solar panels and wind power, etc. So we're taking it to the next level. We're just asking facilities to go ahead and document whether or not they can actually do this. Now, the good news is, if you do this cost benefit analysis and you go, whoa, this makes sense, you have a continuous improvement project. So whenever your sustainability committee and whatever your group is looking at these new ideas and looking at what you can do, please note that anytime you come up with a planned reduction or a planned change in your facility, that definitely can be used as a continuous improvement project. So I encourage you to really set aside February 10th, and we can't say that enough, but also to know that we are going to be providing, the technical committee is working to provide these templates and these other programs so that we can help you implement them within your facility. So what everybody looks at for the implementation timeline, oh my gosh, when is this going to impact me? So all facilities right now that are undergoing certification or recertification. So if you applied to the program prior to January 1 of 2022, you will certify to those 2016 criteria unless you decide to opt into the new criteria. If you take a look at the new criteria, either you're undergoing recertification or certification, you go, hey, this looks pretty good. I'm going to go with the 2022 criteria. That's fine. You can do that. You would just need to send a note to Wendy Naden, letting her know which way you're going to go. Any new applicant has to certify to the 2022 criteria, and obviously we do give you until January 1 of 2024 to gain certification. Now, if you are undergoing certification or you're going through recertification, there have been templates, annual report templates on the tracker that incorporate 2016 criteria. They have been created in your files for the next 2 years. So I encourage you to not delete them and wonder what the heck they are. So because when the tracker changes, and right now it looks like the flip date for the new tracker is going to be February 4th, if you're currently certified, you will have the ability to go in and continue your annual reports in the 2016 certification criteria. I've also wanted to let you know that when the switch is flipped for the tracker, it will only reflect the 2022 criteria. Documents will not be lost. Don't have a panic attack because Green to Sustainable never, kind of like, you know, some of us, they don't delete anything, so you will be able to request it. But know that the templates, all of that is going to be the new 2022 certification criteria. So I encourage you, I understand and I know that we will be sending out an email following this program for you to sign up for the February 10th webinar that's going to talk about and walk you through the changes to the SGP Impact Tracker. And the goal is to have the tracker flipped before this webinar so you can take time to walk through it and come to that program with your questions. And with that, we are at the time of our program. We tried to leave enough time so that if there are questions about what might not have changed or what did change, we can go ahead and have a discussion. So I asked Jonathan to see if there are any questions. So Jonathan, are there any questions that people had for us? You're unmuted, but I don't hear you. Let's see, we do have a question that says, on the management change, they have an internal standard operating procedure written. Yes, you can just add on to that standard operating procedure. As long as it hits all the wickets for the requirements for SGP, you don't have to have a separate standard operating procedure for the new certification criteria. You just need to look at what you currently have and see how it might need to be changed. As Doreen says, Doreen Montaloni has indicated that she will be sending out an email about the February 10th webinar with instructions on how to register for everyone after this event ends. So I encourage you to go ahead and sign up for that program as well. And a copy of the 2022 criteria, you should be able to access that on the SGP website. We have posted the 2022 criteria to the website. Let's see. I have another question. I'm reading it right now. Okay, yes, the environmental audit is compliance-based only. And the waste audit includes the waste audit looks at recycling, it looks at food waste. Paul, help me out if I'm missing, I know that I'm missing elements, but it really looks at anything that focuses on the solid waste side.
Yes, anything with trash or disposal.
Correct. And that will become more clear. The new template for the environmental audit really does ask printers to, and ask any certified facility to actually document where they gain their information. So it would ask under the environmental audit, state air permitting. Do you need an air permit? Yes or no? If no, please tell us why. If yes, please list what type of permit you have, and if you have any permit conditions, what do you need to, what is it you need to comply with? That's an oversimplification of what you would need to put in there, but we are asking for more documentation level. So if a company applied before January 1, 2022, but isn't certified, yes, they are under the 2016 certification criteria. They can opt to go to the 2022 certification requirements. However, if they applied before January 1, you are covered by the 2016 certification criteria elements. So universal waste, you would have to look at the template, but the template is going to ask you, solid waste template is going to ask you how much universal waste you are generating, and it will list it by category. And we're just looking at generation under the audit, and you look at disposal and you put it into the audit, and then you can look at whether or not you have any way to reduce. If a company has an audit coming up in April, they can use either version. Yes, but I would bet if they're coming up for an audit in April, they're going to opt for the 2016 because they probably already have most of their certification criteria elements documented. And the templates the audit templates that we're discussing are still in Excel format. And as Paul mentioned, under metrics, we have moved audits. We have moved some of the metrics up under the air emissions characterization. So the information on VOCs and HAPs and the information on control devices, if applicable, has now been moved up under air emissions characterization so that the metrics is just that one metrics document. So metrics documents you're looking at still can be an Excel spreadsheet. You can still send an Excel spreadsheet to Green to Sustainable and they will upload. So your company's audit is in October. Yes, if you applied prior to January 1, 2022, you can do either. You can choose to continue with the 2016 certification criteria elements, or you can look at the 2022 and determine if that is the way you wish to go. Because you applied before January 1 of 2022, you should have within your impact tracker program annual reports created for the next few years that reflect the use of the 2016 certification criteria. So this might be, I will have to talk to my colleague Gary Jones about this one because of the new requirement. Wait, I just lost that one. About COVID-15, ongoing COVID-19 disinfection to eliminate chlorine from janitorial programs might be problematic. I'd have to check with Gary about that. He is my sanitation expert. And they're used, so I'm not sure where hand sanitizers fall. I will have to confer, obviously, with the lead auditor. That's a question for her. Any other, these are good questions. Any other questions? Are there any areas, let me ask you this, are there any areas in the certification criteria other than, say, the management of change as well as the solid waste audit, which is new, that you would like to you would prefer a deep dive on. Yeah, and when we say deep dive, as Paul indicated, oh, good, vendor communications, excellent. We can do one of those. And yes, this program is being recorded, so it will be available to those of you that either signed on late or were those that were not able to attend. Any other? So we have a vote for vendor communications. Anyone else?
Hey, Marci, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Gary.
You want me to weigh in on the disinfectant question?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. So the CDC did revise their guidelines, probably about 5 months ago or so, and don't quote me on that. But they, for routine cleaning purposes, you can use what they call regular household cleaners, and there are plenty of those that don't contain bleach. If you have someone that becomes infected in the workplace, they obviously want you to do a deeper dive and disinfect that area where the employee was at, things that they would have touched. And again, there are disinfectants that are not chlorine based. Of course, chlorine bleach is a great disinfectant that can be used, but like for example, Lysol, which is based on a quaternary ammonia compound, that can also be used to disinfect, and it doesn't contain bleach. So there are options other than bleach that you can use for disinfecting, and for regular routine cleaning, bleach isn't necessarily called for.
Thank you.
Sure.
So we have a vote for a deeper dive on vendor communications, which doesn't surprise me since we have really looked at how to integrate the whole concept of circular economy. Would a session on the circular economy be of interest? And we will check with Wendy on tracking of alcohol hand wash used. Okay, I don't hear of anything. Oh, yes, please include, oh, circular economy and vendor communication. I asked the question and I just have to wait for you guys to type. Yeah, I think that it would be interesting to just have a little bit of a deep dive on the circular economy, what it is, how it's being implemented, and then also looking at the whole, then how it flows into our discussions on vendor communication for both the customer base as well as looking at how does that impact for the supply community. So I see, Paul, that we're going to have lots of little conversations in the future.
Definitely.
All right. Well, we will try to do a mini video on each criteria, but we'll wait and see. We have other options that we're looking at to see how we can continue to educate the industry through the Sustainability Academy on the elements within the SGP certification criteria. So yes, materiality, I think what that would fall under is when we're talking about the circular economy, when we start looking at materiality issues and end-of-life discussions. I think that's really where the discussion of materiality plays. So again, we'll be able to have a better deep dive discussion on that in a separate session that talks about this. Okay, any final questions or thoughts? Okay, well, from Paul and myself, we thank you for your attention. And I thank you that we are able to provide this 50,000, really a 50,000 foot level of the changes to the certification criteria. And we are developing guidelines for all things. So we will be able to provide that information to you. But then, of course, it's up to each facility to look at how they're going to integrate and move forward with the certification criteria. So I'm really glad that everyone was able to join us today. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and contact us. You can reach us at sgpprogram@sgppartnership.org. All right. Yes, the website is not working. I apologize. We will make sure that we can go ahead and send out a copy of the 2022 certification criteria elements to everyone that registered for this program. Thank you again, and we will talk soon.